Hello, I'm Alex, and I'm glad to welcome you to another episode of our series Drivers of Innovation by Naumann Foundation here in Hong Kong.
Hello, thank you for having me. My name is Karena, Belin. I'm the co-founder of WHub. We're Hong Kong's community builder and power connector, and we love to support startups and help them scale by connecting them to the resources they need.
Since we both are German, I guess we learn back home that you need a certain political framework or certain societal liberties in order to make businesses prevail and grow. What is your take on that after having lived in Japan and here? How important is the framework that is provided, let's say in Hong Kong, for instance, in order to make businesses grow and prosper?
Yeah. So I'm not sure, again, if you're referring to legal frameworks or structure. I think, again, one of the advantages that Hong Kong can provide is in having such a huge amount of SMCs and businesses and infrastructure, either provided by the government, logistical, but also legal infrastructure. Obviously, it helps. We're very active in the fintech scene, and fintech is also one of the focus area of the government. I always like to use that as an example because, when you talk fintech, you talk regulators, and sometimes the regulators get in a bad light by saying, oh, they're only there to say no. But at the same time, they provide frameworks, they provide procedures that also help you create sustainable businesses, a certain, structure. Structure is great because A, it gives you a certain backbone, and B, it also gives you an idea on what are the elements that you need to challenge. So I'm always a little bit, on both ends of the structure where I can see the advantages, and then I can see, where are the elements where, sometimes you have to be able to be a little bit more flexible or challenge these structures.
Yeah,
but I think Hong Kong has the right mixture, actually, exactly with that.
And yeah, and again, what I meant precisely is actually a mix out of that.
Yeah.
If you have the rule of law, this may exactly. Sound like that's the human rights and whatnot, but it's also a corruption-free environment. So there is a huge span of things
Absolutely.
That rule of law means. And so that's if you have investments, if you bring investments into a region or a country, you want to be be secure and certain your money is used for what you want it to.
Exactly. Yeah. Again, all these structures, when it comes to fintech, be it KYC rules, AML rules, anti-money laundering, or know your customer rules. It really also helps create structures that are sustainable because they won't go bust overnight because it was bad money or dirty money or any touchy things that you were involved in.
Just even though that's a bit off topic, but I'm interested in because you spoke about fintech,
yeah.
Let's also speak a tiny bit about Bitcoin, because that's basically things
yes.
people in Hong Kong talk about all the time. And this is actually regardless if it's Germany, Singapore, China, yes. or the United States, that seems to be a very challenging topic for the state per se, regardless which one, because that has been money issuing has been the domain
right.
of the state, other than in Hong Kong where the banks issue the money. How is the take on Bitcoin here in Hong Kong?
Yeah. So very interesting. Blockchain obviously is discussed a lot, and within the context of blockchain, particularly in Hong Kong being a financial center, cryptocurrencies are talked a lot. The interesting thing is in Hong Kong, you do not only have one regulator, like for example Singapore, where you have the MAS. In Hong Kong, you have the SFC and the HKMA. So depending if you're regulating the banks or if you're regulating, exchange-related and securities. So both are talking, and obviously both are exposed. The HKMA, by the way, they have their own program on developing a central bank cryptocurrency. And everybody is playing around with it, particularly on ICOs. We talked that, right? So initial coin offerings. Hong Kong does rank in the top 10 of hubs, for ICO issuance, but actually way far behind Singapore. And I think the top 3, if I'm not mistaken, should still be the U.S., Switzerland, and Singapore. And it is because I think also from a pure image point of view, Hong Kong being so close to China and China having had a very clear stance on the issue of cryptocurrencies and ICOs, it does definitely impact. And the regulator so far in Hong Kong has been on a little bit more conservative approach compared to other ecosystems. So yes, it is definitely discussed. Is it as hype as it is, for example, in Singapore? No. Are there plans, obviously, on moving things forward? Yes, and I think even the government probably has an interest because, as you know, there are ICOs are tax, you pay income tax on it, so it's a nice income source if you can develop that further.
And, one other currency, if not the most important one in hubs of innovation, is the people themselves, the human resources, as it's called.
Yes.
How would you describe the people in Hong Kong who engage in the startup ecosystem? Because basically the city is so big in finance with all the offerings in money. So you need to be, I guess, like a certain type of entrepreneurial youngster, or even like in another age group, whatever, to be capable and willing to enter this sort of like more uncertain, if you will, like area of startups.
Yeah. So again, there are actually different elements to when we talk about talent. I mean, first of all, in general, the best way to describe Hong Kong's ecosystem is to say that it's very diverse. So that is also true with regards to the talent base. That's true in terms of age of founders, very diverse. You talked about bankers, right? We have a lot of examples of career switchers, not only from banks, but also from other industries. So the average age is around 32, 33, but the variance is huge. So you have, like even my case, I was already over 40 when I started the company, but you also have the youngsters from the university, and fortunately more and more. So that risk aversion is fading away, maybe also because the switching costs are getting a little bit less. So that's very interesting. It's very diverse in terms of nationality. Only about, I would argue 1/3 of founders are actually non-local founders. And also then in terms of gender diversity. So if you take all SMEs, Hong Kong is one of the most diverse entrepreneurial cities with female and male ratios. In the tech scene, a little bit less, unfortunately, of course, but that's very interesting. Now, the other aspect that you said is about, we were talking that up front in terms of tech talent versus talent that is maybe more coming from a business development angle. Obviously, Hong Kong with an economy that has over 90% is service-based, you have great talent. You have a great business development, marketing talent, service-related talent. On the pure tech side, you have high-tech and high-qualified talent, but in terms of quantity, not enough for the scene. And that is one, again, other reason why the closeness to Shenzhen is very interesting, because, again, Shenzhen is able to attract tech talent from across China. And there are big hopes on leveraging the diversity of these two ecosystems, putting them together. Again, very international, service-oriented, high-educated, talent here in the service sector, and then on the other hand, the tech sector in Shenzhen.
And that actually, like, this one aspect of like e-commerce and service seems to be like, even in the perception of Hong Kong, be under-highlighted, or underlighted, if that word exists even, because the predominance of the financial sector is that big. Is that correct? You have like a large, enlarging number of businesses that look into exactly that, the service industry, e-commerce and such?
No, absolutely. Again, one of the most diverse ecosystem in terms also of industry. The focus area from the government and also what is discussed in media is around health tech, it's around fintech, it's around smart city, which very often relates to IoT and hardware, and is robotics. At the same time, if you look at the quantity still from the traditional, and from the history of Hong Kong, the biggest number or the biggest quantity of startups is still in e-commerce, in SaaS, so software as a service, logistics. And even our unicorns in Hong Kong, they come not only out of the financial sector, but they also come out of the logistics sector, tourist sector. And then you have even very interesting verticals such as prop tech, like property tech, textile tech, education technology, ed tech, insure tech, rec tech, industries that develop here.
That's a colorful like array of industries that you may in fact not be seen, they're not visible here like on first sight. So that sounds very inspiring. So being here an entrepreneur, what inspires you to live in Hong Kong, to work in Hong Kong?
Yeah, well, what inspires me is really the tagline of WHub is the startup passion. So the company was built really around the passion for entrepreneurs, for startups, really believing that startups will drive a positive impact to our society, be it on innovation, or be it also on the opportunities that they provide for people to be part of the workforce. So it's really getting up every morning, making an impact, and helping these startups to find the resources they need, be it talent, investors, acceleration programs, corporate partners to co-innovate together. That motivates me and my co-founder.
Just as a last question, I mean, you have been living abroad now for a long time, but when I'm sure you follow one or the other debate about the
Yes.
internet and startups in Germany as much as you follow it here. What would you, if you could give some recommendations, some advice, some hint, what would you like to say the German startup ecosystem, what they can learn from the hub here in Hong Kong?
Right. So I actually have to say I was very impressed from the startup ecosystem in Berlin, which I had the pleasure to meet regularly because I always come to Tech Open Air.
Cool.
So it's also very diverse, it's very pragmatic. I think what you can learn here, I think it's just obviously from a market perspective, it's a very different consumer here. There are very different business cases and problems to solve. I think that is already stimulating, and having that exchange between different ecosystems, sometimes looking at similar problem statements or similar business models, but that in the execution then really become fundamentally different. I think what you can learn is obviously culturally. That's what I learned, when I moved here to Asia over 15 years ago. I think the cultural aspect of Asia is a very interesting one, and I think I would wish all my colleagues back in Europe to come here and learn that. So I think in general, as I said, startups are meant to go global. Therefore, connecting to a diverse consumer group as well as having a diverse team on board is key. And I think that is the really exciting part. And at the end of the day, I see that with my younger children. I think the younger generation, they feel probably a child here in Hong Kong feels way closer to a child in Germany than to their own grandmother that maybe lives here in Hong Kong or back in China.
Thank you very much for your insights. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you for having me. It was great. Thank you.
Cool. So Hong Kong is very much a financial hub. People will talk about businesses and finance and whatnot. So is it difficult for someone who has a technology-driven startup idea to prevail in such an environment? How did you find people that would invest in it?
And this is really a challenge here because the main issue in Hong Kong is that there are too many investment options available here. So for example, people in addition to investing on startups, they can invest on real estate, they can invest on stock market.